Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1000 Gurus, where we share the stories and lessons from people of all walks of life. I'm your host, Yonocruz. So today's episode is another recap episode for Season 9. As I've been doing at the end of each season, just like with this one, I wanted to take some time to reflect on the previous episodes, share my honest behind-the-scenes thoughts on how each one went, what stood out to me, and my favorite takeaways. As I said before, this is mostly for me to lock in the lessons from each conversation because I genuinely get more out of these episodes every time I revisit them. But hopefully, if any of these guests or topics sound interesting to you, this is your invitation to go back and listen or re-listen to whichever ones resonate. Also, this one's going to be audio only. I feel like if I don't need to do video, I would prefer to keep some of these as audio only. It's a lot easier to produce, but also less to worry about and hassle with all the files and whatnot. The idea of this show was originally supposed to be like an audio only show because there's not really any value of me having my face on the screen to show you guys what I'm doing. I have my notes and sort of things that I want to read off, but there's not really anything exciting visually. So I figured this is a good episode to just do audio only. With that being said, let's go back to the season. One thing I'll say about Season 9 as a whole is that it had a really nice range. We had a book highlight, a couple of random show episodes, a handful of return guests, and some really deep one-on-one conversations that covered everything from AI and the future of work to dance, medicine, grief, comedy, mental health, etc. There was a lot of good stuff in the season, and so we'll jump straight into the recap. So without further ado, please enjoy this recap of Season 9. Episode number 81, Random Show with Aeden Pham, Self-Care versus Indulgence, Speaking with Integrity, and Spending Habits. So Aeden is one of my most frequent guests at this point. Honestly, the Random Show format is one of my favorites to record because there's no pressure to stick to a prepared topic. We just follow whatever's interesting in the moment, and this one had a really natural flow. We went from relaxation in music and dance to dating and emotional authenticity to therapy to money habits and phantom costs of stuff you own. Just a little bit of everything, which is kind of Aeden's whole vibe. My favorite takeaway is the distinction between self-care and indulgence, which really hit for me. It sounds like a small semantic difference, but there's a really meaningful gap. Self-care restores you. Indulgence just feels good in the moment and often costs you something later. Related to that, the phantom cost of space, the idea that owning things you don't use has a hidden cost beyond just the money that you spent on it in terms of the mental overhead, the physical space. And this is something that I've been thinking about ever since. Very much in the spirit of the KonMari episode from last season. Episode 82, Alex Hung, AI tools leading productive teams and navigating the changing workforce. Alex is one of my most frequent return guests, and every time he comes back, there's always something meaty to dig into. And this time it was about AI, and specifically not just the hype side of it, but the practical boots on the ground reality of actually rolling out AI tools at a company. He's done it firsthand and had real examples, real limitations, and real takes on what it means for people doing the work. Probably the most timely episode of the season given where things are at with AI right now. But honestly, with how fast technology moves, I wouldn't be surprised by the time you listen to this, some of the things that we talk about are kind of outdated as well. My favorite takeaway was his point about AI having clear limitations due to lack of context, was grounding in a world where everyone's either panicking or overhyping. But the bigger takeaway for me was the advice to go horizontal with your skills. Don't just dig deeper into one narrow lane because that's exactly what AI is going to eat first. Broaden out, build proof of work, and develop resilience through failure. That's durable career advice, regardless of what AI ends up doing. Also, his LinkedIn insights on toxic high performers were sharp. Someone who gets results but poisons the culture around them is still a net negative, and not enough people say that out loud. Episode number 83, Book Highlights, Make Time by Jake Knapp and John Zeratsky. So this was our book highlight episode for the season, and Make Time was a natural pick. It's a book that I've had on my radar for a while, and it connects directly to the themes of focus, intentionality, and cutting through the noise that come up constantly on this show. The 4-step daily framework, highlight, laser, energize, reflect, is simple enough to actually use, which is honestly rare in the productivity space. My personal favorite takeaway, the highlight concept, is one that stuck with me the most. The idea of choosing one thing each day that you want to make your focal point, not as your only task, but as the thing that you feel good about at the end of the day if you got it done. It's a gentle but effective antidote to the infinite to-do list mindset. Also, the point about tech and distractions being the main enemy of flow, not laziness, not lack of motivation, but the constant low-grade interruptions that fragment your attention before you even get started. Episode number 84, Richard Hardy, Finding Faith, Exploring Fitness, and Seeking Feedback for Success. This was Richard's second appearance on the show in back-to-back seasons, which says a lot about how much there is to unpack with him. Where his first episode 76, was focused heavily on the mental side of door-to-door sales and self-talk, this went deeper into his personal evolution, the 75 hard journey is continuing, his fitness and nutrition approach, and a more vulnerable conversation around faith and re-engaging with the church. It also had some great in-studio energy and the banter that made it one of the more fun recordings of the season. My favorite takeaway was the quote-unquote CEO of your own life framing for door-to-door sales was something that clicked for me. The idea that sales isn't just a job, it's a crash course in running yourself like a business, managing your own schedule, energy, rejection tolerance, and feedback loops. Nobody's holding your hand, which means you have to develop a level of self-accountability that most people in traditional employment never have to build. Episode number 85, Brian Lil B. Perez, Winning International Competitions, The Evolution of Locking, Podcasting as Public Therapy, and Finding Joy in Dance. So Lil B is someone I go way back with from our Academy of Villain AOV days, which was for me when I was in high school, my senior year in high school. So this was one of those reconnection episodes that I find deeply satisfying. He's one of the best lockers I know, and getting to hear his full origin story from DDR and working at Konami to becoming an internationally competitive locker was really cool. My favorite takeaway, the discussion on teaching joy in music and dance was something I needed to hear. There's a tendency in the dance world to overcoach the technical side while the groove and the feeling get treated as secondary or assumed. Lil B is very intentional about training the in-between, the movements between the moves, which is a lot of where the soul actually lives in dancing. And his framing of podcasting as public therapy resonated with me too, because honestly, that's part of why the show has always been so fulfilling for me, is because it's nice to talk about these big ideas that I've been mulling over and getting the perspective of other people. Episode number 86, Travis Trinh, AX Summer Cut Regimen, Cosplay, Anime Spoilers and Hot Takes, and Bowling Technique Deep Dive. Travis is another return guest, and this one was exactly what a return guest episode should be. It was a genuine catch-up on wherever he needs to go. We talked about his gym and nutrition routine leading up to Anime Expo. We went deep on cosplay planning, which is surprisingly a very involved process. Dropped a bunch of anime hot takes with full spoilers, and somehow ended up in a pretty detailed breakdown of bowling technique. It was a fun, low-stakes episode, and I always enjoy recording with Travis because the energy is easy and we can go anywhere. My favorite takeaway was the macrofactor breakdown, which was genuinely useful. It's an app that adapts your calorie targets based on your actual weight trend rather than a static formula, which makes a lot more sense physiologically, and especially since it came from Travis, who I consider to be very high level and adept and knowledgeable at body recomposition. And honestly, the bowling technique conversation ended up being more interesting than I expected. There's a lot of nuance in lane conditions and consistency that casual bowlers like myself never really think about. So it's a good reminder that almost any hobby has real depth if you're willing to go looking for it. Episode number 87, Ramy Sidhom, Embracing the Variety of Life, Advice for Medical School, and Being Bold with Solo Travel. So Ramy is one of those guests that I've been wanting to have on for a while because he's lived such a genuinely varied life, being a Cabo Modern competitive dancer, board-certified physician, solo world traveler, and he carries all of it with this really grounded, joyful energy. The conversation covered a lot of ground, but it never felt scattered because Ramy has a clear through line. Lean into what brings you joy and don't ignore what you hate. Simple but hard to actually do. My favorite takeaway was his advice on navigating medical school and specialization really stood out. A lot of career advice usually focuses on following your passion or chasing prestige, but Ramy's version is more concrete. What does a Tuesday look like in this job, and can you live with that? And also, it's not only choosing what you like, but also what you don't like. And his solo travel philosophy is that being in an unfamiliar place is one of the fastest ways to learn about yourself, is something that I deeply agree with. Episode number 88, Blessie Panopio, New Fitness Journey, Reading Habits, Concerts, GOAT Discussions, and Dealing with Grief. So Blessie is a return guest as well, and I love catching up with her because she brings this really warm, honest energy to the show, even though I talk to her every day and see her every other day or so. This episode had a nice range from the practical, like her fitness and nutrition journey and getting back into reading through library apps, to the more personal, like her mom's health scare. We had some random topics like discussions on GOATs, meaning the greatest of all times. So that was a fun detour. And the closing reflection on grief as love with no place to go is one of the more quietly moving moments of the season. My favorite takeaway was that exactly, which is the reframe of grief, which is essentially love that's lost its destination. It's one of those ideas that's simple enough to say in a sentence, but takes a while to actually land. strips away the idea that grief is something to fix or get over, but it instead treats it as a natural extension of caring about someone deeply. On a lighter note, her approach to fitness, like prioritizing sleep first above everything else, it's practical advice, and I think a lot of people overlook it because it's less exciting than what type of workouts to do or what type of food to eat. Episode number 89, Angie Tran, art inspiration, stand-up comedy, financial planning, and prioritizing mental health. So Andrew, also known as Tranju, is someone I have a lot of history with from the Kaba Modern world. We actually go into this a lot, but we didn't meet on Kaba Modern, but we met through Kaba Modern as he had left the team already when I joined the team. And getting to hear his full story, like being a theater kid to breakdancer to stand-up comedian to financial services manager and is now expecting a baby and he lives in Las Vegas, it was genuinely great to catch up with him. He's one of those people who has reinvented himself multiple times, and he has the self-awareness to actually articulate what he learned from each chapter, which is fantastic as a guest on this show. The mental health thread running through the entire conversation was honest in a way that I really appreciated. So my favorite takeaway was his breakdown of how he wrote and structured stand-up sets as something that I found unexpectedly useful, even outside of comedy. I'm myself a comedy enthusiast. I'm not good at stand-up comedy, but I love talking about it and the science and art of it. The process of taking an observation and finding a specific angle that makes it land and then editing it ruthlessly until only the essential stuff remains is all best practices. And that's good creative discipline, period, not just for comedy. The practical mental health framework he closed with, therapy, exercise, sleep, emotional self-awareness, is straightforward, but worth saying out loud as many times as possible. So that is it. That is it for our season 9 recap. Hopefully you guys found this helpful, and ideally it'll inspire you to check some of them out. I'm a little bit biased because I loved all these episodes and we covered such a wide range of topics, which is always fun for me and pretty much the entire point of this show. So that is pretty much it. I will do my usual sign off. So thank you guys for joining today as usual. If you have a second, please like, follow, subscribe, leave us 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening to, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc., YouTube. I'd really, really appreciate it. Reminder to be kind to other people, especially yourself. And remember that you can always learn something from someone if you take the time to listen. So thank you guys for being here.